The morning Sarah Chen stepped out of her apartment in downtown Tokyo, the sky was the wrong color. Instead of the familiar blue she had known for 32 years, and sickly green hue painted the heavens above. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, her coffee cup trembling in her hand as other pedestrians around her began pointing upward, with expressions of growing terror. Massive ships, each the size of Manhattan, hung motionless in the atmosphere above every major city on Earth. They had arrived without warning during the night, their arrival so silent that most of the world's population had awakened to find them already there, casting enormous shadows across the landscape below. Sarah pulled out her phone, but the screen showed nothing but static. The same static that was now emanating from every television, radio, and communication device across the planet. Then, as if responding to some unseen signal, every screen on Earth simultaneously flickered to life with the same image. The being that appeared was unmistakably alien. Its elongated skull gleamed under harsh lighting, and its forearms moved with fluid precision as it spoke in a voice that somehow reached every human ear in their native language. The creature's name was Zarthek, Supreme Commander of the Catherian Empire, and its message was simple and devastating. Humans of Earth, the alien's voice resonated with cold authority. Your species has been evaluated and found wanting. Your planet contains resources vital to our expansion across this galaxy. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally, or face complete extermination. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving 8 billion people staring at blank screens in stunned silence. Then the panic began. Within hours, the highways leading out of major cities became parking lots of abandoned vehicles as people fled on foot. Governments around the world scrambled to establish communication with the alien ships, but every attempt was met with silence. The massive vessels simply hung there waiting. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, head of the International Space Defense Initiative, watched the chaos unfold from his command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. For 15 years, he had been dismissed as a paranoid conspiracy theorist for insisting that humanity needed to prepare for extraterrestrial contact. Now, as reports flooded in from around the globe, his warnings seemed prophetic rather than paranoid. "Sir," his aide rushed into the room, "we're getting readings from our deep space sensors. There are more ships coming, hundreds of them." Michael studied the data streaming across his monitors. The alien fleet was massive beyond comprehension, but something about their approach patterns troubled him. They were moving too slowly, too methodically, almost as if they were overconfident. Meanwhile, in a small farming town in Kansas, retired Marine Colonel James Mitchell was teaching his grandson how to field strip an old rifle when the alien broadcast reached them. James had served in 3 wars and seen humanity at both its worst and its finest. As he watched his grandson's terrified face, something hardened in the old soldier's chest. "Grandpa, are we going to die?" the boy asked. James set down the rifle and placed a weathered hand on his grandson's shoulder. "Not if I have anything to say about it, son." Across the ocean in London, Prime Minister Elizabeth Hartwell convened an emergency session of world leaders via encrypted military channels. The aliens had made one crucial mistake in their psychological warfare. They had given humanity time to think, to plan, and most dangerously of all, to get angry. "They expect us to roll over like frightened animals," she declared to the assembly of presidents, prime ministers, and generals. "They clearly don't understand what they're dealing with." The first alien attack came exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum, just as promised. The assault was swift and precise, targeting military installations and major population centers with weapons that turned matter into superheated plasma. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Mumbai, Cairo, and dozens of other cities were struck simultaneously. The death toll was staggering. In the first hour alone, 7 million people perished as alien beam weapons carved through buildings like they were made of paper. The psychological impact was exactly what the Catherians had intended: to break humanity's will to resist before the real invasion began. But something unexpected happened in the aftermath of that first devastating strike. Instead of surrender, instead of the mass capitulation the aliens anticipated, humanity did something that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. They got mad. In the ruins of Manhattan, firefighter Captain Rosa Martinez pulled survivors from the wreckage while alien ships patrolled overhead. Her station house was gone, along with half her crew, but she kept working. When a news crew found her 12 hours after the attack, covered in dust and blood but still saving lives, her words would become a rallying cry for the species. "They think they can scare us into giving up," she said, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "They don't know us very well, do they?" Dr. Rodriguez emerged from his bunker to coordinate the global response. His deep space monitoring stations, dismissed for years as wasteful spending, suddenly became humanity's most valuable assets. The data they provided revealed a startling truth. The Catherian Empire was vast but spread thin across dozens of star systems. The ships currently threatening Earth represented a significant portion of their mobile fleet. If humanity could find a way to damage or destroy them, it would take years for reinforcements to arrive from the Catherian home systems. In basements and bunkers around the world, scientists, engineers, and military strategists began working around the clock. They studied every piece of data from the initial attack, analyzed the alien technology, and searched for weaknesses. The Catherians had made their second mistake. They had underestimated human ingenuity born from desperation. As the first week after the attack drew to a close, something remarkable was happening. The scattered resistance groups were beginning to coordinate. Amateur radio operators, dismissed as hobbyists in the age of the internet, suddenly became vital communication links. Underground networks that had existed for decades in various forms now served a single purpose: the survival and liberation of the human race. Colonel Mitchell, now leading a growing militia in the American heartland, received word that similar groups were forming on every continent. The aliens controlled the cities, but the countryside belonged to humanity. And in the countryside, humanity was preparing for war. 3 weeks after the initial attack, Dr. Elena Vasquez made a discovery that would change the course of the war. Working in a makeshift laboratory hidden beneath the ruins of the Mexico City University, she had been analyzing fragments of alien technology recovered from crash sites. The Catherian weapons operated on principles that human science barely understood, but Elena had always excelled at finding patterns where others saw only chaos. As she studied the crystalline components under her improvised microscope, she noticed something remarkable. "The energy matrix is unstable," she whispered to her assistant, Maria, who was keeping watch at the laboratory entrance. "It requires constant recalibration to maintain coherence." What Elena had discovered was the Achilles heel of Catherian technology. Their weapons were incredibly powerful, but required sophisticated targeting systems that operated on specific frequencies. More importantly, these frequencies could be disrupted. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, former MIT professor David Kim was making his own breakthrough in a hidden facility beneath the Seoul subway system. Along with a team of volunteer engineers, he had been reverse engineering Catherian shield technology from debris found in the Han River. "The energy barriers aren't solid," David explained to his team as they gathered around a holographic display cobbled together from salvaged components. "They pulse in cycles, creating microscopic gaps every 3.7 seconds. These discoveries reached Dr. Rodriguez through the growing network of resistance scientists. The information traveled via coded messages transmitted by ham radio operators, smuggled on memory chips by refugees, and passed along through a dozen different underground channels. In his Rocky Mountain Command Center, Michael studied the data with growing excitement. For the first time since the invasion began, he saw a path to victory. The plan that emerged was audacious in its scope and devastating in its simplicity. If the resistance could coordinate simultaneous attacks on Catherian installations across the globe, using the frequency disruptions and shield timing Elena and David had discovered, they might be able to deal a crippling blow to the invasion force. But coordination required communication, and the aliens had destroyed most of Earth's communication infrastructure in their initial attack. The solution came from an unexpected source: amateur radio operators who had been quietly maintaining their equipment, despite years of being told their hobby was obsolete. Betty Morrison, a 78-year-old retired teacher from Ohio, became the unlikely coordinator of a global communication network. From her farmhouse basement, equipped with radio gear her late husband had collected over 5 decades, she relayed messages between resistance cells on 6 continents. "This is Echo Base calling all stations." Her voice crackled through the static night after night. "The cavalry is coming." The message was code for the upcoming coordinated strike, set for exactly 30 days after the initial invasion. But preparing for the attack required more than just communication. Humanity needed weapons that could penetrate alien defenses. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal tracker William Namatjira led a team of survivors who had been studying alien patrol patterns for weeks. Using traditional hunting techniques passed down through generations, they had learned to move invisibly through terrain the aliens couldn't effectively monitor. "They see with machines," William explained to the international volunteers who had joined his group. "But machines don't understand the land like we do." His team had successfully ambushed 3 alien scouting parties, capturing weapons and gathering intelligence about Catherian tactics. The aliens, it turned out, were not as invincible as they appeared. Away from their ships and heavy equipment, individual Catherian soldiers were vulnerable to conventional weapons. This intelligence reached resistance cells worldwide, sparking a series of increasingly bold raids on alien positions. In the Amazon rainforest, former Brazilian Special Forces operator Carlos Santos led hit-and-run attacks against alien mining operations. In the Sahara Desert, Tuareg nomads used their knowledge of the harsh terrain to harass alien supply convoys. Each successful attack provided more intelligence, more captured equipment, and most importantly, more proof that the aliens could be defeated. The psychological impact of these victories was immense. Humanity began to shed the paralyzing fear that had gripped the species since the invasion began. In hidden settlements around the world, children who had cowered in terror just weeks before now practiced military drills alongside adults. Sarah Chen, the Tokyo office worker who had witnessed the first alien ships, now served as a courier for the Japanese resistance. She moved through the ruins of her city with practiced stealth, carrying messages and supplies to hidden safe houses. The terrified woman sipping coffee that first morning had transformed into someone harder, more determined. "They took our cities," she told a group of new recruits, "but they can't take our spirit." As the date for the coordinated attack approached, unexpected allies emerged from the chaos. The International Space Station, presumed destroyed in the initial assault, had actually survived by powering down all systems and playing dead. The 6 astronauts aboard had spent weeks observing alien fleet movements and preparing for their own contribution to the resistance. Commander Lisa Park, mission commander of the ISS, established contact with ground forces using a backup communication system the aliens hadn't detected. Her bird's-eye view of alien positions proved invaluable for planning the upcoming strikes. "We can see their weak points from up here," she reported during a coded transmission. "Their formations have gaps that ground-based sensors can't detect." The information from the ISS allowed resistance leaders to refine their attack plans. Instead of random strikes, they could now target specific vulnerabilities in the alien defensive grid. But perhaps the most important development was the emergence of a unified command structure. Dr. Rodriguez found himself coordinating with military leaders, scientists, and civilian organizers from around the world. Despite speaking dozens of different languages and coming from vastly different cultures, they all shared a single goal: driving the invaders from their planet. The night before the attack, Betty Morrison broadcast her final message to resistance cells worldwide. Her voice, now familiar to millions of survivors, carried a mixture of determination and hope that had sustained the human spirit through the darkest month in the species' history. "Tomorrow, we remind them what it means to threaten Earth," she said. "Tomorrow we show them what humans do when we're backed into a corner." Across the globe, in hidden bunkers, ruined cities, and remote wilderness camps, humanity prepared for the largest coordinated military operation in history. They had salvaged weapons from the ruins of their civilization, jury-rigged equipment from alien technology, and most importantly, they had learned to fight as one species united against a common enemy. The aliens had given humanity time to adapt, and humanity had used that time well. The coordinated attack began at exactly 0400 GMT on a Tuesday morning that would be remembered as the day humanity stopped running and started fighting back. Across 6 continents, resistance cells emerged from hiding and struck at alien positions with a precision that caught the Catherian forces completely off guard. In the ruins of New York City, Captain Rosa Martinez led a team of firefighters and former police officers through the subway tunnels toward a Catherian processing facility. They carried improvised electromagnetic pulse devices built from Elena Vasquez's research, designed to disrupt the alien weapon systems at the critical moment. "Remember," Rosa whispered to her team as they approached their target. "We hit the shield generators first, then the weapon platforms. We've got exactly 90 seconds before their backup systems come online." The attack erupted simultaneously across the globe. In London, Prime Minister Hartwell herself led a strike team against the alien command post in Westminster. In Tokyo, Sarah Chen's group emerged from the subway system to assault the alien garrison that had occupied the Imperial Palace. The frequency disruptors worked exactly as Dr. Vasquez had predicted. Alien weapon systems flickered and failed as human-generated electromagnetic interference overwhelmed their targeting computers. For the first time since the invasion began, Catherian soldiers found themselves facing enemies they couldn't simply vaporize. But the aliens adapted quickly. Within hours of the initial attacks, they began changing their weapon frequencies and deploying backup systems. The window of vulnerability was closing rapidly. That's when Dr. David Kim's discovery about the shield timing became crucial. Resistance fighters who had memorized the precise pulse patterns began slipping through alien defensive barriers, using conventional weapons and explosives to devastating effect. In the Australian outback, William Namajira's team used the shield gaps to plant explosives at the base of a massive alien mining platform. The explosion that followed was visible from space, sending a pillar of fire and debris 2 kilometers into the sky. "One down," William reported over the radio network. "About 1,000 to go." The psychological impact of these successes reverberated through both human and alien forces. For the first time, Catherian troops began showing signs of uncertainty. Their previously methodical advance stalled as commanders were forced to reassess the threat posed by what they had dismissed as primitive prey. Supreme Commander Zarthek, observing the coordinated attacks from his flagship in orbit, experienced something he had never felt before in 3 decades of conquest: doubt. The humans were supposed to have been broken by the initial assault. Instead, they had somehow organized a resistance that was inflicting real damage on his forces. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "These creatures barely qualify as a spacefaring species. Their technology is centuries behind ours." The tactical officer, a veteran of a dozen successful invasions, studied the battle reports streaming in from the surface. "Commander, they're not trying to match our technology. They're using our own weapons against us." This was the key insight that both sides were beginning to understand. Humanity couldn't build better weapons than the Catherians, but they could find ways to turn alien technology against itself. Every captured device, every piece of wreckage, every scrap of alien equipment became a source of intelligence and improvised weaponry. In Mexico City, Dr. Elena Vasquez had moved beyond simple frequency disruption. Working with a team of volunteer engineers, she had begun modifying captured alien weapons to work with human targeting systems. The result was a hybrid technology that combined the devastating power of Catherian energy weapons with human tactical flexibility. "The key is the crystal matrix," she explained to a group of resistance leaders via secure radio link. "We can't manufacture their crystals, but we can reprogram them. Instead of drawing power from their ships, we can make them draw power from our own generators." This breakthrough led to the development of the first truly effective human anti-alien weapons: jury-rigged energy rifles that could punch through Catherian armor, portable shield generators that could protect small groups of fighters. Most importantly, electromagnetic warfare devices that could disable alien vehicles and equipment. The tide of battle began to shift as these weapons reached resistance cells around the world. In the Amazon rainforest, Carlos Santos used modified alien weapons to destroy an entire Catherian patrol. In the Sahara, Tuareg fighters equipped with portable shield generators successfully defended a convoy of refugees against alien air support. But the aliens were learning too. Commander Zarthek ordered his forces to adapt their tactics, deploying heavier weapons and pulling back from vulnerable positions. The easy victories of the first day gave way to grueling battles of attrition. The real test came when the aliens launched their counterattack. Massive Catherian warships descended from orbit to provide direct fire support to ground forces. Their weapons could level city blocks with single shots, and their shields were too powerful for the improvised human weapons to penetrate. This is when the International Space Station crew made their move. Commander Lisa Park and her team had spent weeks preparing for this moment, using the station's remaining fuel and equipment to construct what was essentially a giant electromagnetic pulse bomb. "We've got one shot at this," Lisa reported to ground control. "If we can get close enough to their command ship, the EMP should disable their orbital platforms long enough for you to hit the ground installations." The mission was essentially a suicide run. The ISS had no weapons, no shields, and no way to escape once they made their attack. But Lisa and her crew had volunteered anyway, understanding that their sacrifice could save millions of lives on the surface. As the space station changed course toward the alien flagship, resistance fighters on the ground prepared for their own desperate gambit. If the orbital strike succeeded, they would have perhaps an hour to destroy as many alien installations as possible before backup systems came online. The battle for humanity's survival was about to reach its climax. In hidden command centers around the world, resistance leaders watched their displays with held breath as the ISS approached the alien fleet. Everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed, came down to this moment. Dr. Rodriguez, coordinating the global effort from his Rocky Mountain bunker, spoke into his microphone one final time before the attack commenced. "All stations, this is command." His voice carried to resistance fighters on every continent. "Today we show them what it means to pick a fight with Earth. Today we show them what humans can do when we stand together." The response came back from 1,000 different voices, speaking a dozen different languages, but carrying the same message of defiance that had sustained the human spirit through the darkest month of their history. The real war was about to begin. The International Space Station's final mission began with a silence that stretched across the void between Earth and the alien fleet. Commander Lisa Park watched through the observation window as the massive Catherian flagship grew larger, its alien architecture gleaming coldly in the light of the sun. "EMP devices armed and ready," reported her engineer, Yuki Tanaka, his voice steady despite knowing they would never see home again. "We'll need to get within 2 kilometers for maximum effect." The alien ships detected the ISS's approach when they were still 10 kilometers out. Energy beams lanced through space, forcing Lisa to execute evasive maneuvers that pushed their improvised propulsion system to its limits. The space station, never designed for combat, shuddered under the stress. "Hull breach in Section C," called out cosmonaut Viktor Petrov. "Sealing now." On the surface below, every resistance cell watched their instruments, waiting for the signal that would indicate the orbital strike had succeeded. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Dr. Rodriguez tracked the ISS's progress on screens that showed far too many alien ships and far too few human assets. "Come on, Lisa," he whispered. "Give us our chance." The space station's approach triggered alarms throughout the Catherian fleet. Supreme Commander Zarthik watched the primitive human vessel with a mixture of contempt and growing unease. Its course was clearly suicidal, but there was something about its unwavering trajectory that disturbed him. "Destroy that vessel immediately," he ordered, but the ISS had one advantage the aliens hadn't anticipated. Its small size and low profile made it a difficult target for weapons designed to engage massive warships. Lisa used every piece of debris in orbit as cover, weaving between destroyed satellites and space junk, while the alien gunners struggled to track such a small, maneuverable target. At 3 kilometers from the flagship, disaster struck. A direct hit from an alien energy beam destroyed the station's main propulsion system, leaving them drifting on momentum alone. "We're not going to make it," Victor reported, his hands flying over the damaged controls. "We need another 1.5 kilometers." That's when Yuki made a decision that would be remembered for as long as humans told stories of heroes. The Japanese engineer began manually venting atmosphere from the station's remaining intact sections, using the escaping gases as improvised thrust. "The explosion will be less effective with a hull breach," he explained calmly as he worked, "but we might have enough reaction mass to get within range." The improvised propulsion system worked, but it came at a terrible cost. The ISS began breaking apart under the stress, sections spinning away into the void. By the time they reached the optimal distance from the alien flagship, only the central hub remained intact. "Now," Lisa shouted, and Yuki triggered the electromagnetic pulse device. The explosion was invisible but devastating. A wave of electromagnetic energy washed over the alien fleet, overloading systems and short-circuiting the sophisticated electronics that controlled their weapons and shields. For exactly 47 minutes, the most advanced fleet in Catherian history was reduced to floating metal. On the surface, The effect was immediate. Alien weapons stopped firing. Force fields flickered and died. Across the globe, resistance fighters who had been pinned down by superior firepower suddenly found themselves facing enemies as vulnerable as they were. The counterattack was swift and merciless. In New York, Captain Rosa Martinez led her team out of the subway tunnels and straight into the heart of the alien command center. Without their energy shields, Catherian soldiers fell to conventional weapons fire. The processing facility that had been converting human prisoners into slave labor was liberated within minutes. "This is for the 7 million, Rosa said as she planted explosive charges throughout the alien installation. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In London, Prime Minister Hartwell's strike team overwhelmed the alien garrison and reclaimed the Houses of Parliament. In Tokyo, Sarah Chen's group freed thousands of prisoners from alien holding facilities. But perhaps the most significant victory came in the Sahara Desert, where Tuareg fighters had discovered something the aliens had tried desperately to hide: a massive construction project that appeared to be some kind of interstellar communication array. William Namajira, who had traveled from Australia to observe the alien operations, immediately understood the implications. "They're calling for reinforcements," he reported to the Global Resistance Network. "We need to stop this transmission." The battle for the communication array became the focal point of the entire war. Alien forces, despite their disabled equipment, fought with desperate ferocity to protect the installation. They knew, as did the humans attacking them, that the outcome of this single engagement could determine the fate of both species. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working with captured alien equipment, had discovered that the communication array operated on principles similar to their weapons systems. If she could modify her frequency disruptor technology, she might be able to permanently damage the device. "I need to get within 50 meters of the central transmitter," she explained to Carlos Santos, who had brought his Amazon fighters to join the desert battle. "But the approach is completely exposed." Carlos studied the alien positions through binoculars. Even without their energy weapons, the Catherians had fallen back on projectile weapons and defensive positions that made a direct assault nearly impossible. "Leave that to us," he said. "We've gotten good at impossible things lately." The assault began with a coordinated diversion. Human fighters attacked the array from 3 directions simultaneously, drawing alien defenders away from the central transmitter. Under cover of this chaos, Elena and a small team of engineers began their approach to the heart of the installation. The 47 minutes of alien system failure was almost over when Elena reached the transmitter. Her hands worked frantically on the frequency disruptor as alien systems began flickering back to life around her. She could hear the distinctive whine of Catherian energy weapons powering up. 10 seconds, she called to her team. "We don't have 10 seconds, Carlos replied. Watching alien reinforcements converge on their position, Elena made the same choice that Yuki had made in orbit. She didn't just activate the frequency disruptor, she overloaded it, turning the device into a massive electromagnetic bomb that would destroy the transmitter at the cost of everything within a 100-meter radius. "Get out of here," she ordered her team. That's not a request. The explosion of the overloaded disruptor created an electromagnetic pulse that not only destroyed the communication array but also permanently damaged every piece of Catherian equipment within a kilometer. More importantly, it sent a message to alien forces across the planet. Humanity was willing to make any sacrifice necessary to win this war. Supreme Commander Zarthek, watching from his flagship as his invasion force reported one disaster after another, faced a reality that no Catherian commander had ever confronted. His technologically superior forces were being systematically defeated by primitives using improvised weapons and suicidal tactics. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost contact with 60% of our ground installations. The humans have somehow managed to coordinate attacks across their entire planet." Zarthek studied the tactical displays, trying to understand how his certain victory had turned into a potential defeat. The humans fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, but it was focused madness, directed by intelligence and coordination, that should have been impossible for such a primitive species. "How long until reinforcements arrive from the home fleet?" he asked. 18 months, Commander. Perhaps longer if the humans have truly destroyed our communication array." For the first time in his military career, Zarthek considered the possibility of retreat. But retreat would mean admitting that the mighty Catherian Empire could be defeated by creatures who had barely learned to leave their own planet. As alien systems came back online across the Earth, both sides prepared for the next phase of a war that had already exceeded everyone's expectations. The humans had proven they could hurt the invaders, but the aliens still controlled orbital space and had reserves of equipment and personnel. The real test of human determination was yet to come. The weeks following the electromagnetic pulse attack marked a fundamental shift in the nature of the war. What had begun as a simple extermination campaign had evolved into a grinding conflict that tested both species' capacity for adaptation and survival. Supreme Commander, Zarthek found himself fighting a type of war that no Catherian military academy had ever taught. The humans refused to engage in conventional battles where superior alien technology could dominate. Instead, they had disappeared into their planet's wilderness, cities and underground networks, emerging only to strike at vulnerable targets before vanishing again. "They fight like vermin," complained Sub-Commander Kethvar during a strategy meeting aboard the flagship. "They attack supply convoys, sabotage our equipment, then scatter before we can respond. This is not warfare. This is pest control." But Zarthek was beginning to understand that humanity's apparent weakness was actually their greatest strength. They didn't need to win conventional battles. They only needed to make the occupation too costly to maintain. On Earth, the resistance had evolved from desperate survivors into a sophisticated fighting force. Dr. Rodriguez coordinated operations from his Rocky Mountain Command Center, but the real leadership now came from the field commanders who had learned to think like guerrilla fighters. Colonel James Mitchell, the retired Marine from Kansas, had become the de facto leader of North American resistance forces. His farm had been transformed into a training center, where civilians learned military tactics and captured alien weapons were reverse-engineered into human-compatible systems. The key to beating them, Mitchell explained to a group of new recruits, isn't matching their firepower. It's making them afraid to leave their fortified positions. This philosophy was being implemented across the globe. In the Amazon, Carlos Santos had established a network of hidden bases that could strike at alien installations throughout South America. In Africa, tribal leaders had united under a common cause, using traditional hunting techniques to devastating effect against alien patrols. Perhaps the most successful resistance operation was taking place in the ruins of Tokyo, where Sarah Chen had evolved from a frightened office worker into a master of urban warfare. Her knowledge of the city's underground infrastructure allowed resistance fighters to move unseen through areas the aliens thought they controlled. Every building is a potential fortress, Sarah taught her followers. Every sewer tunnel is a supply route. Every basement is a weapons cache. They may have destroyed our cities, but they can't occupy ruins. The psychological warfare was taking its toll on both sides. Catherian soldiers, accustomed to quick, decisive victories, found themselves constantly looking over their shoulders. Every shadow could hide a human sniper. Every seemingly abandoned building could conceal a bomb. The stress of constant vigilance was wearing down alien morale. Meanwhile, humanity had discovered something about themselves that generations of philosophers had debated. When faced with extinction, humans became capable of almost unlimited endurance and sacrifice. Betty Morrison, the amateur radio operator who had become the voice of human resistance, broadcast nightly messages that kept hope alive in the darkest moments. Her words reached survivors huddled in basements, fighters planning impossible missions, and scientists working around the clock to develop new weapons. They thought they could break us in 72 hours. Her voice crackled through the static. It's been 4 months and we're still here. We're still fighting, and we're winning. The evidence for her optimism was growing daily. Alien supply lines were under constant attack. Their mining operations had been reduced to a fraction of planned output. Most critically, human scientists had begun to unlock the secrets of Catherian technology at an accelerating pace. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working from a new laboratory hidden in the Mexican mountains, had achieved the impossible. She had successfully manufactured synthetic versions of the crystals that powered alien weapons. The process was crude and expensive, but it meant that humanity was no longer dependent on captured equipment. "We can't mass-produce them yet," she explained during an encrypted video conference with resistance leaders worldwide. but we can make enough to equip special strike teams with weapons that can penetrate their heaviest armor. This breakthrough coincided with another critical development. The astronauts aboard the International Space Station had not died in their suicide mission. Commander Lisa Park and 2 of her crew had somehow survived the destruction of the ISS and had been rescued by a human space probe that had been secretly launched years earlier. The probe, part of Dr. Rodriguez's long-term defense planning, had been designed to establish a hidden base on the moon. Now it served as humanity's only off-world asset, equipped with sensors that could monitor alien fleet movements and communication systems that couldn't be jammed by Catherian technology. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore," Lisa reported from the lunar base. "We're fighting for humanity's future among the stars." The lunar observation post provided intelligence that changed everything. The Catherian fleet was not just occupying Earth. They were strip mining the planet's resources to fuel a much larger war effort. Earth was just one front in a galactic conflict that had been raging for centuries. More importantly, the monitoring equipment detected something the aliens had been desperately trying to hide. Their empire was collapsing. Rebellions were breaking out on dozens of worlds. Supply lines were failing. The Catherian military was stretched far beyond its capacity to maintain control. "They're not here because they're strong," Dr. Rodriguez realized as he studied the intelligence data. "They're here because they're desperate." This revelation reframed the entire conflict. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prevent the aliens from gaining the resources they needed to suppress rebellions across their empire. Every day the resistance could delay the mining operations was another day for other species to break, free from Catherian domination. The knowledge that they were part of a larger struggle against tyranny energized human resistance forces, but it also attracted unwanted attention. Deep space sensors detected new alien ships approaching the solar system. Not Catherian vessels, but ships belonging to species that had been fighting their own wars of liberation. First contact with humanity's first alien allies came through a message transmitted directly to the lunar base. The signal carried a simple greeting in dozens of languages, followed by coordinates for a meeting in the asteroid belt. Commander Lisa Park took the lunar shuttle on what was essentially a diplomatic mission to meet representatives of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. What she found there challenged every assumption about humanity's place in the universe. The alliance consisted of 7 different species, each of whom had spent decades fighting against Catherian expansion. They had achieved various degrees of success, but none had managed to deal the Empire the kind of devastating blow that humanity had inflicted in just 4 months. "Your species fights with a desperation that we have never encountered," explained Ambassador Theclon of the Zephyrian Republic. "The Catherians have conquered 100 worlds, but none have resisted like yours. The Alliance offered humanity weapons, technology, and strategic intelligence. In return, they wanted to study human military tactics and psychological warfare techniques. The methods that had evolved from humanity's darkest hour were apparently unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. But the Alliance also brought a warning. The Catherian Empire, facing rebellions on multiple fronts, was preparing to implement a final solution to the human problem. If they couldn't extract Earth's resources quickly enough, they would sterilize the planet and move on to other targets. "How long do we have?" Lisa asked. "Based on their fleet movements," Theclon replied. "Perhaps 6 months before they deploy their planet-killing weapons." The race was on. Humanity had 6 months to either drive the aliens from Earth completely or find a way to protect their planet from weapons that could crack continents. The guerrilla war that had sustained them for months would have to evolve into something much more ambitious. As Lisa prepared to return to Earth with this intelligence, she reflected on how much had changed since that first morning when alien ships had appeared in human skies. Humanity had gone from a single, isolated species to key players in a galactic war for freedom. The question now was whether they could survive long enough to see that war through to victory. The alliance with the Galactic Liberation Front transformed the war from a desperate struggle for survival into something far more complex and dangerous. When Commander Lisa Park returned from her diplomatic mission with alien technology and strategic intelligence, humanity faced a choice that would define their species' future. Dr. Rodriguez convened an emergency meeting of resistance leaders from around the world. The holographic displays in his Rocky Mountain bunker now showed not just Earth, but star charts depicting the positions of Allied fleets and Catherian reinforcements scattered across dozens of light years. The Alliance is offering us weapons that could drive the Catherians from Earth in weeks, he explained to the assembled commanders. But using them would announce to the entire galaxy that humanity has become a major player in this war. There would be no going back to isolation. Colonel Mitchell, participating via encrypted video link from his Kansas stronghold, was the first to respond. With respect, Doctor, isolation was never an option after they killed 7 million of us. The only question is whether we fight this war on our terms or theirs. The debate that followed revealed the fundamental tension humanity now faced. Some argued for accepting the alien weapons and technology, viewing them as tools necessary for survival. Others worried that becoming dependent on alien allies would compromise human independence and ingenuity. Sarah Chen, speaking from her position in underground Tokyo, offered a perspective that surprised many. We've already proven we can hurt them with our own methods. Maybe the question isn't whether to use their weapons, but whether to combine their technology with our tactics. This hybrid approach became the foundation of humanity's new strategy. Rather than simply adopting alien technology wholesale, human engineers worked to integrate selected components with existing weapons and systems. The result was a uniquely human approach to galactic warfare. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now working with materials and knowledge provided by the Alliance, achieved breakthroughs that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Her team successfully created the first human-built energy weapons that could match Catherian firepower while remaining reliable and maintainable by Earth-based technicians. The key was understanding that their technology isn't actually superior, she explained during a global resistance briefing. It's just different. They've optimized for raw power and standardization across their empire. We've optimized for adaptability and resource efficiency. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. William Namatjira, the Aboriginal tracker who had become one of Earth's most effective guerrilla leaders, made a discovery that would reshape the entire conflict. While studying Catherian patrol patterns in the Australian outback, William noticed something that more technologically sophisticated observers had missed. The aliens were avoiding certain areas not because of human resistance, but because of something in the environment itself. They're afraid of the songlines, he reported to Alliance scientists during a joint intelligence briefing. The magnetic patterns in the rock formations interfere with their navigation systems. This observation led to a startling realization. Earth's magnetic field, unique among planets in the local stellar region, was actually a significant disadvantage for Catherian technology. Their weapons and vehicles required constant recalibration to function properly in Earth's magnetic environment. The Alliance scientists were fascinated by this discovery. None of the other worlds they had liberated possessed Earth-specific combination of magnetic characteristics and geological diversity. Humanity's planet was essentially a natural fortress against Catherian technology. This knowledge enabled a new type of warfare. Instead of trying to match alien firepower, human forces began leveraging their planet's natural advantages. Underground bunkers were positioned to maximize magnetic interference. Attack routes were planned to take advantage of areas where alien equipment functioned poorly. The Catherians, meanwhile, were facing pressure from multiple directions. Supreme Commander Zartek received reports of successful human attacks almost daily, but these were overshadowed by news from other fronts. 3 more worlds had joined the rebellion, and Catherian supply lines were collapsing across an entire sector of their empire. The humans have become a symbol, his intelligence officer reported during a grim strategy session. Other species are studying their resistance methods and implementing similar tactics. Our losses are becoming unsustainable. Sartek faced an impossible choice. He could commit more resources to conquering Earth, but doing so would weaken other fronts and potentially trigger additional rebellions. Alternatively, he could withdraw from Earth, but such a retreat would be seen as an admission of weakness that could bring down the entire empire. The decision was made for him when long-range sensors detected the approach of an Alliance battle fleet. Humanity's new allies were bringing the war directly to Earth's solar system. The Battle of the Solar System began 3 months after first contact with the Alliance. Catherian reinforcements, racing to prevent the loss of their Earth occupation force, met Alliance ships in the asteroid belt. The engagement that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human observers, watching from their lunar base and hidden installations throughout the solar system, witnessed the first space battle their species had ever seen. Massive ships exchanged weapons fire across thousands of kilometers while fighters and bombers weaved between asteroids in complex three-dimensional combat. But humanity was not merely a spectator. The Alliance had provided them with small spacecraft capable of operating in the vacuum of space. Human pilots, many of them former atmospheric fighter pilots, took to space combat with an adaptability that amazed their alien allies. "They learn faster than any species we've encountered," reported Zephyrian squadron leader Feltar after flying alongside human pilots in their first space engagement. "Their tactics are unconventional but devastatingly effective." The human approach to space combat reflected the same principles that had made their ground resistance so successful. Unable to match alien technology directly, they focused on unpredictability, adaptability, and leveraging weaknesses in enemy systems. During the height of the battle, a group of human pilots led by former Air Force Captain Jennifer Walsh executed a maneuver that became legendary throughout the Alliance. Using modified Catherian fighters captured during ground operations, they disguised themselves as alien reinforcements and penetrated deep into the enemy formation before revealing their true identity. "This is for the ISS crew," Walsh transmitted as her squadron opened fire at point-blank range on a Catherian capital ship. The psychological impact of the attack was enormous. Catherian pilots, already struggling with equipment issues caused by Earth's magnetic field, now had to consider that any approaching ship might be a disguised enemy. The paranoia and uncertainty that had plagued their ground forces spread to their space operations. As the battle raged in space, resistance forces on Earth launched their most ambitious operation yet. Every major alien installation on the planet came under simultaneous attack. The goal was not just to inflict damage, but to demonstrate that humanity had evolved from desperate survivors into a coordinated military force capable of planetary-scale operations. Captain Rosa Martinez, now leading resistance forces in the ruins of North America's eastern seaboard, coordinated strikes against alien strongholds. From Florida to Maine, her forces had grown from a handful of firefighters and police officers to a sophisticated army equipped with hybrid, human-alien technology. "Today, we take back our world," she announced over the Resistance Communication Network. "Today we show them that Earth belongs to humanity." The coordinated ground assault achieved objectives that would have been impossible in the early days of the resistance. Alien mining operations were shut down across 6 continents. Communication installations were destroyed faster than they could be repaired. Most critically, the orbital defense platforms that protected the Catherian fleet were neutralized by ground-based weapons. When the Battle of the Solar System ended 18 hours after it began, the strategic situation had been transformed. The Catherian fleet, cut off from reinforcements and unable to maintain their positions without ground-based support, found themselves trapped in a solar system that had become hostile territory. Supreme Commander Zartek, surveying the damage from his crippled flagship, finally understood what his empire was truly facing. This was not just a rebellion by primitive aliens. This was the emergence of a new kind of warrior species that fought with a combination of technological innovation and primal determination that the galaxy had never seen before. The question now was whether the Catherian Empire could adapt to this new reality, or whether humanity's example would inspire enough rebellions to bring down 3 centuries of galactic tyranny. The final phase of the Earth Liberation War began not with a massive battle, but with a transmission that changed everything. Supreme Commander Zarthek, his fleet trapped and his empire crumbling, sent a message that reached every human on the planet simultaneously. Humans of Earth. His voice carried through every speaker, every communication device, every screen that the Resistance had rebuilt in the months since the invasion began. "I am authorized by the Catherian High Command to offer terms for your surrender." But the message that followed was not the ultimatum humanity had expected. Instead, it was something unprecedented in 3 centuries of Catherian expansion. An offer of negotiation between equals. "Your species has demonstrated capabilities that were not anticipated by our initial assessment. The High Command is prepared to discuss terms for coexistence that would be mutually beneficial to both our peoples." Dr. Rodriguez, monitoring the transmission from his command center, felt a mixture of triumph and wariness. After 8 months of brutal warfare, the aliens were ready to talk. But humanity had learned the hard way not to trust Cytherian promises. It could be a trap, warned Colonel Mitchell during an emergency conference of resistance leaders. They could be buying time for reinforcements to arrive. Commander Lisa Park, speaking from the lunar base where she now coordinated Alliance intelligence operations, provided crucial context. Our allies confirm that Cytherian forces are being recalled from 7 different sectors. They're not just retreating from Earth. They're pulling back across their entire frontier. The intelligence was staggering. The successful defense of Earth had triggered a cascade of rebellions that was tearing the Cytherian Empire apart. What had begun as humanity's desperate fight for survival had become the catalyst for the largest galactic upheaval in recorded history. The decision of how to respond to the alien offer divided humanity in ways the war itself had never managed. Some argued for accepting negotiations as a way to secure peace and begin rebuilding their devastated world. Others insisted that any agreement with the Cytherians would be a betrayal of the 7 million who had died in the initial assault. Sarah Chen, now representing the Asian resistance networks, offered a perspective that resonated with many survivors. They didn't negotiate when they killed our families. They didn't negotiate when they turned our cities into ruins. Why should we negotiate now that we're winning? But Captain Rosa Martinez, whose own experiences in the ruins of New York had given her a deep understanding of war's true cost, argued for a different approach. We're not fighting for revenge. We're fighting for survival. If we can achieve that without losing more people, isn't that what our sacrifices were for? The debate that followed revealed the fundamental question that would define humanity's future. What kind of species did they want to become as they emerged onto the galactic stage? Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose scientific innovations had been crucial to human success, provided the insight that ultimately shaped the decision. We have something they want beyond Earth's resources. We have methods of resistance they've never encountered. Maybe the real question isn't whether to negotiate, but what to demand in return for sharing what we've learned. This perspective transformed the discussion. Instead of viewing negotiations as a sign of weakness, humanity began to see them as an opportunity to reshape the galactic balance of power. They would negotiate, but from a position of strength and with demands that would benefit not just Earth, but all the species fighting for freedom. The negotiations took place aboard a neutral vessel provided by the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Humanity's delegation included Dr. Rodriguez as chief negotiator, supported by military leaders, scientists, and representatives from every major resistance network. The Cytherian delegation was led by Zarthek himself, accompanied by officials from the High Command who had traveled from the Empire's core worlds. For many humans, it was their first opportunity to see their enemies face to face without weapons drawn. You fight unlike any species we have encountered, Zarthek admitted during the opening session. Our military analysts have spent months trying to understand your tactical methods. They defy conventional strategic theory. Dr. Rodriguez studied the alien commander who had ordered the deaths of millions of humans. Despite everything Zarthek had done, the man found himself recognizing a fellow professional soldier, trying to salvage what he could from an impossible situation. We fight the way we do because we had no choice, Rodriguez replied. You forced us to become something we never wanted to be. The question now is whether we can find a way forward that doesn't require more killing. The negotiations that followed lasted for 3 weeks and covered everything from territorial boundaries to technological exchange. But the core issue was simple. Humanity demanded the complete withdrawal of Cytherian forces from Earth and a guarantee that no future invasion would be attempted. In return, the humans offered something the Cytherians desperately needed: detailed documentation of the resistance methods that had proven so effective. The Empire, facing rebellions across dozens of worlds, wanted to understand how to counter the tactics that humanity had pioneered. You're asking us to help you suppress other species' freedom, Sarah Chen pointed out during one heated session. That's not acceptable. But the final agreement was more nuanced than simple tactical exchange. Humanity agreed to provide information about defensive resistance methods, while the Cytherians committed to fundamental changes in their imperial policies. The Empire would transition from a system of conquered territories to a confederation of autonomous worlds with voluntary membership. The treaty signing was broadcast across the galaxy. marking the first time in 3 centuries that the Catherian Empire had agreed to limit its own expansion. More importantly, it established humanity as a recognized galactic power with the right to defend other species against aggression. The immediate aftermath of the treaty was chaotic, but hopeful. Catherian forces began their withdrawal from Earth, dismantling installations and evacuating personnel under the watchful eyes of Alliance observers. Human survivors emerged from hiding places they had occupied for months, blinking in sunlight they had wondered if they would ever see again. Betty Morrison, the amateur radio operator whose voice had sustained human hope through the darkest times, made her final wartime broadcast from her Ohio farmhouse. "The ships are leaving," she reported, her voice thick with emotion. "After 8 months, 16 days, and 12 hours, the last alien vessel has departed Earth orbit." The rebuilding process would take decades. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble. Millions of people remained missing or displaced. The psychological scars of the invasion would affect human culture for generations to come. But humanity had also gained something unprecedented: knowledge of their place in a larger galactic community, and the confidence that they could defend that place if necessary. The resistance networks that had formed during the war evolved into the foundation of Earth's new planetary government, while the technologies developed during the conflict laid the groundwork for humanity's emergence as a spacefaring civilization. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now leading Earth's new Department of Xenotechnology, worked to adapt alien innovations for peaceful purposes. The energy systems that had powered weapons of war were converted to provide clean power for rebuilding cities. The communication networks that had coordinated resistance operations became the backbone of a new global infrastructure. 5 years after the treaty signing, Commander Lisa Park stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar vessel, preparing to depart for the Andromeda Galaxy. As part of an Alliance peacekeeping mission, Earth had gone from isolated target to galactic protector in less than a decade. "Do you think they'll remember what we went through?" asked her second-in-command, a young officer who had been a child during the invasion. Lisa looked back at Earth, its blue surface now dotted with the lights of rebuilt cities and orbital installations. "I think they'll remember that when someone tried to take away our future, we fought back. And I think that's exactly what they should remember. The Catherian invasion had cost humanity 7 million lives and nearly destroyed their civilization. But it had also revealed something about the human spirit that even humans themselves hadn't fully understood. When faced with extinction, they had not simply endured. They had adapted, innovated, and ultimately transformed both themselves and the galaxy around them. The war was over, but humanity's greatest adventures were just beginning.